All right, thank you so much for joining us for today's Gradient 101 session. I am Kate Pylan. I'm a customer success coach with GradeCam, and we are going to talk about tips and tricks for using standards as a part of your assignments that you're creating in Gradient. So we will start off with that step by step. We'll go through some pro tips and give you some extra credit about how you're taking your assignments even further. With the presentation today, you'll find the link in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat and we'll answer them as we get to them. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, in our step-by-step, when you are adding standards to an assignment, you are adding these just very easily to a multiple question assignment that you have created in Gradient. You can either do this with an existing assignment, or as you're creating your new one, you can add your standards there. I think perhaps that's one of my favorite things about adding standards within Gradient, those assignments, is you don't have to add them right away. You can add them after the fact, even after you've collected responses. So if you are just getting that assignment created and out to the door, you can always come back later and modify your key. So I'm in an existing assignment now, and I do already have responses collected on this, but keeping in mind that if you're adding those standards, you can just add it right when you create your key the very first time. To add standards to a question, you just select the question. You can either check the box and then click edit, or select the title. And I do modify since I'm working with an existing assignment. And then as you scroll down here in the section, it says add standard. To add a standard, I can select add standard. You can search by grade level, subject, source, as well as keyword. For this particular one, I'm just going to narrow down to the source. I'm going to go ahead and limit it down to grade 4. I can then scroll through and read through what I want. I do like that I can hide these filter options, that if I at least have a little bit more information about what I'm looking for. You can also expand the description or collapse them if you kind of have a better idea of what number it is and you just want to get down there a little further. That's another way to kind of look through your information. If I hover over it, it gives me additional information, but that is really tiny, so it's kind of hard for me to read. So once I want to find the assignment or the standard that I'm looking for, you'll check the box. You can select multiple standards or just one, and I can hit save. What I also like about this is that I can add the same standard to multiple questions by checking the box next to all of them. You can either hit edit, or you can go directly to standards. So if the question's already created and you're just going back to add those standards, I just navigate straight to the standards window. And now I'm going to make this one 4-3 just to make that a little bit different. And then hit collapse and save. Once you close that down, now you can see that all of my questions here have a standard added to them. A good review as you are adding these standards to the questions, you can review all of them if you toggle the show standards button. And so I can read it here. This is nice just as I'm reviewing through. If I wanted to make sure I had the correct ones or addressed them all properly, that's another way to view that. But that just gets obviously very overwhelming if you have a lot of large text in your standards. So going back over here to our presentation, is you can create the assignment or edit an existing assignment. You add your standards before or after you've collected those responses. And then the power of adding those standards to your assignments is just the additional data and reports that you can get. So you can go into the reviewing of those standards reports. If you click on the hyperlink here, it'll take you kind of to some basic navigation, but I want to go back over to a report just to show you where that's at. What you'll notice that if you are in your GradeCam account and you don't see standards here, it means you haven't added those standards. So the standards doesn't show up when you're going into your student by standard. If you don't have any standards added, it would just have overview, exam report by question, no by standard, and then you wouldn't have the lowest standard. So just know that those reports don't appear until you actually have standards to show. I really enjoy looking at the students by standards if I'm thinking about how I'm going to build in my subgroups or my centers so that I can have students all focus in a particular area at a time. That as a class, I may know what standards I want to do. So I can say, what am I going to review as a class as we prep for the next day? Classes by standard. Looking at both of my classes may need to touch on this specific standard or what I can do. My world history class doesn't need the first 2 standards. I don't need to review that with them. But then how am I going to build out my subgroups of students is you go to the students by standard, and then I can sort or review which standards each particular student may need, and I can create my groups from there. So those are really good pieces. If you're an administrator or a PLC leader, going into the classes by standard and the teachers by standard may become a little bit more valuable to you, because that divides it up when you're having a conversation with, if I was comparing the standards data across a couple teachers, is, what did one teacher do in comparison to another teacher that may have helped them with a particular standard or area. So those standards reports become really, really powerful over time. Some pro tips that as you are setting up how you're using your standards within your Gradient account. If I go back over here to Gradient, you do want to check and make sure you have the correct state in there, which when you set up your account, that should be done, but it's a good way to check. And then we can talk about personal standards as well as custom standards from the admin side. So if I'm in my Gradient account, go over to the profile icon in the upper right, click on settings, and then navigate over in the menu to standards. Here you can change or adjust your state if you need to. You also have the toggle to align to an entire topic and or the strands. You have that additional information. If you would like to have personal standards, you can add personal standards, and these are exclusive to your account. So like my example here is using the depth of knowledge levels, that if I in particular was looking at how my students were doing on the different levels, DOK 1, 2, and 3, 4, I can add those. Those are personal standards. You give it a standard code, like what are you going to put in the search bar? So that's why mine's DOK 1. What's the subject area that this will be let go around? I would call that depth of knowledge, because that's the category or the source that I'm going to be researching. And then description, that's additional information so that when I'm searching that, I can use those as key terms that I would look at. So description can be there. Once you add that personal standard, then you see them show up here. The nice thing about adding personal standards is that if I would then share an assignment that has my personal standards to it, those standards do go with the assignment. So other teachers could look at those standards if they would like to see them as well. They don't have to add the personal standards to their account prior to being able to see that particular data. So that's all what a single teacher can do. Going into a school or district account, you may want to look at custom standards. So there may be additional standards that we don't have those standards banks already available to you that you can add to your assignment. So if you would like have the customization of having depth of knowledge for the entire district so that everybody's doing it, because that's a school or district goal, to add custom standards, you would go up here under your icon again and administer your account. You can only add custom standards for a school or district if you're the admin for that particular school or district. To add custom standards, you would go into Admin Console, select More, go to Custom Standards, and here you can either add them one at a time, similar to how you would do personal standards, or you can select Import, and import will give you additional instructions as well as downloading a sheet example of how you could load these in mass. So a great resource there if you're uploading a lot of standards at one time. Some extra credit as you kind of move forward is what are you going to do? How can you take this even further? Those standards reports, which we touched on, and I showed you that from there, you could use this student growth measures. I think it's really nice that if you go into a specific student, so let me return to teacher mode, go to view students, and then I'm going to go into Emily. I can look at reports here and kind of review standards. If this will give you a lot of information if you have a lot of assignments, but I like to kind of narrow down into a specific standard, kind of see what her score is or her average for a particular standard area is. So it is going to pull all the assignments that have that standard and you can review an average. Those are some conversations that you can build in or work with your students. So just knowing that you having those standards out in there, particularly if you're looking at standards based, how can you do that information over time? The standards longitudinal report is another good report to kind of review just to see how a standard would grow or change over time as well. We put these tips in here just when you're searching those standards that I had mentioned when I was adding one is, choose your bank. That's really helpful to narrow it down. Make sure you have kind of a key term that you're looking for. That really helps because if you have English and math that all use 2.2, finding just the code of 2.2 may make it a little difficult to find the standard you're looking for. So if you look for a key term in that description, that makes it a lot easier. And then if you find the standards that you plan on using the same standards over a certain amount of time, you can favorite them. When you favorite a standard, That puts it into another list just so you don't have to search through quite as many. I'll get over there. So when I am in the standards list, if you see the heart next to the checkbox, I can favorite that and it shows up under my favorites list, making it a little easier to locate, especially if you really want to narrow down if you're working on a particular unit. And then if you unfavorite, it obviously drops it straight from your favorites list and it will no longer be filled in on the heart side if you're going to add it there. So there's some navigation tips and tricks. So we're really excited that you're able to join us today. We will send the recording so you can share this with your other colleagues. Please check out some of our other Gradient and GradeCam 101 sessions if you'd like to learn a little bit more in quick, short webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today.